future, talk radio will actually educate, inspire, and make you think. The future is now. Topics and music that affect your life from Universal Broadcasting Network. Tune in at ubnradio.com.
Okay, we found our audience and our cameras and our show. Greetings and salutations, everyone.
Okay,
Pardon?
and the microphone.
And I have a microphone. Yeah. Greetings and salutations, everyone. You've tuned to, finally, Dr. Judy WTF for What the Freud. I'm your host, Walt Lusk, with Dr. Judy Rosenberg, world-renowned author and therapist, founder of the Psychological Healing Center here in Los Angeles, Sherman Oaks, Beverly Hills, and the world-renowned. This is a call-in show, so if you want to call in, you can. It's area code 323-843-2826 if you want to get on the couch with Dr. Judy with your emotional ouch. Next week, we have free-for-all calls. So if you want to get on the couch with whatever you want to talk about, because some of you guys have commented, well, when's you going to do a show on this, that, and the other? Well, guess what? You can call it and chat about it. So next week, the first Thursday of every month, we're going to do free-for-all calls. So we broadcast live every Thursday at 8 p.m. Pacific here at the UBN Studios, Universal Broadcasting Network, ubnradio.com. You can find us on Stitcher, iTunes, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and YouTube, of course. And we may pick some other questions that you guys have posed on YouTube that we haven't answered to our satisfaction next week as well. Mm-hmm. But this week, we are doing our continuing series on fear of abandonment. And before I got started, I wanted to ask, Judy, I wanted to ask you a quick question. Mm-hmm. Are you letting life love you?
Is that a question for me?
It's a question for anybody. It's actually the audience. Are you letting life love you? That was just the question I got this week in one of my emails, and I just thought it was an interesting question. And you can ponder that one for a while. But we're concentrating on fear of abandonment. We had a fabulous call last week from Sheila, one of our fans.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Sheila.
And Sheila, it was a fabulous call. She's quite a fan of and a student of the mind map, and has ripped her book apart, I think, many times. She's even admitted today that she saw the Covert Narcissist show 10 times. And
10 times?
10 times, and she gets something new out of it every time. So
yeah, and for those of you listening for the first time, there are about 150 plus episodes that we've done under every topic that I
we're open for new topics.
And we always think of new ones.
Yeah, we've been doing
it's
this
a
for a while.
It's a growing menu of topics. And tonight we're continuing the theme, as Walt mentioned, on abandonment.
It was actually suggested by a YouTube subscriber.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a really very pertinent topic to our Hole in the Soul series, is what we call these episodes. And Hole in the Soul, from the perspective of the mind map, simply means that we didn't get the emotional nutrients that we needed during the first 2 years of life. And so when we don't get breastfed, and when we're not mirrored, attuned to, when we don't have a mom that's stay at home and creates a sense of emotional regulation for us, when we don't have a safe home environment, then what happens to us is we don't develop a solid sense of self. The inner core becomes damaged. The inner core, in extreme cases, can be very hollow. And so that dark, deep, empty spot, which I refer to as the hole in the soul, is where that abandonment is felt. And last week, Sheila did an excellent job talking about her hole in the soul. In her case, she suffers from borderline personality disorder, which is just another way of saying the system didn't go really well. She wasn't nurtured properly. And so instead of being emotionally regulated, she's emotionally dysregulated. So if you have a moment, Walt, can you put the mind map up? I can.
For those of you that are listening, you can go to www.drjudywtf.com and you can see it for yourself.
Thank you. So the mind map is a system of healing that I created many years ago. It was a system based on healing global disconnect. And I decided, after putting together the system, to try it out on a macro scale. And so I shifted my entire practice from traditional therapy to this Be the Cause mind map therapy that takes you from the wounds of childhood, deconstructs them, takes the poison out that's unprocessed feelings that shows up in all kinds of nasty symptoms, and ultimately shift people out of that so that they can rebalance, reattune, and morph into healing. So that is the structure of the mind map. The top third represents the past. The middle is the deconstruction of the wounds of the past, and then the bottom third represents the healing process and the recoding process. Okay, so in the case of abandonment, what happens is that the wounds, which there are 5 of, okay, the 5 main wounds of childhood are the emotional, physical, sexual abuse, neglect, and smothering. Okay, I think neglect is underestimated because we'll talk about that a lot today.
We're going to touch on that pretty darn quick here.
Right, and smothering is a very underestimated form of abuse, because what happens in the case of smothering, I have a few people that I'm seeing now, they're suffering from being smothered by their mothers, smother mothers, you've heard the term. And what happens is that they become spoilt and they don't know how to really muscle up, and they become weakened by life instead of strengthened by life because they never had to earn anything. And so as a result of that, they don't have the earned self-esteem, and then they feel worthless, really. They feel worthless. Sometimes they feel lazy. They feel hopeless. And ultimately, they get very depressed and dysfunctional.
Now, is that different from the golden child? From a narcissistic perspective?
It's kind of similar.
Kind of sort of similar?
From the to the golden child, because the golden child is over-idealized. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the person who's smothered is also over-idealized. But I think in the case of smothering, we're really talking about the person, the primary wounding here is that everything is given to that person. Also in the case of the golden child. And it's so given to that person that they don't have a sense of forging their own way.
Yeah, I say they expect it.
They expect it,
Yeah.
but then after a while, they stop even trying. And then as they grow older and they have to become responsible, they don't know how to muscle it up. It's kind of like if you go to the gym and your trainer does the work for you, right? Your trainer's going to look better and better, but you're not. Okay, so it's like the mom did the heavy lifting all that person's life, and so now they're kind of dying on the vine because they're not strong. Okay, so that's a very underestimated form of injury, and that causes a sense of worthlessness in the person, a very low sense of self-esteem. So today, back to feelings of abandonment, we're going to go into some physiological aspects of what that means, because during the first 2 years of life, the neurology is forming in that person's brain, okay? And so if that person is not nurtured, attuned to, skin contacted, and so on, if that environment is a disconnected environment, what happens is that these neurons don't form properly. And I know that we pulled a couple of articles on this. I don't know if you have them at fingertip access.
I thought I would read just a smidge here.
Thank you.
A little intro. Mm-hmm. What really is abandonment issues, in addition to what you've said? At the core, abandonment issues are intense fears of being rejected by another. These fears often act out as barriers to meeting new people or prevent you from getting emotionally close to another. Mm-hmm. Concerns over being hurt and the ensuing emotional pain often serve fuel for the, quote, fear of abandonment engine. The paradox going is that many who hold these fears also struggle with codependency issues. And also, sometimes if you have a fear of abandonment, you do things that promote people to abandon you. So it's kind of like a paradox, oxymoron, in that you do things that encourage and so as to prevent you being abandoned.
Right, and I want to talk about that in the context of the WTF, or the what the Freud. And so what the Freud simply means repetition principle. And in the case of fear of abandonment, what people do is they oftentimes will find a partner that will abandon them. So they may hook up with a narcissist who either emotionally abandons them or physically abandons them. And then what happens is that that person is triggered in their core belief of I'm worthless, I'm unlovable, and so on. And that takes them on a bad ride through panels 4, 5, and 6, which I refer to as the Freud, the WTF. So the reactions are so horrible that as a defense mechanism, the person who fears abandonment might actually create the very scenario that they're so afraid of.
It's just crazy.
Which is
craziness.
the repetition compulsion. So they may have overreactions, like, for example, I've had many patients who have a real fear of being abandoned, let's say, for another person, say a woman who comes into the treatment and says, oh, I think my boyfriend's cheating on me. Well, why? Well, because he was out really late at night, and he told me that he'd call me at 10 o'clock, and I didn't get the call until 10:30. Well, in that little span of time, there was no emotional tolerance for that, what shall we call it? See, little babies don't have concept of time, okay? So if you tell a baby, I'll be back in, 5 minutes, they don't know what 5 minutes is. So in the case of people who experience this severe abandonment, that half hour can feel like many hours. So that half hour is then building up an extreme sense of anger. So what do? They start projecting.
Well, their imagination goes wild.
Oh, yeah, right. So in their head, that partner is already having an affair, and in their head, they're playing reenactments of their template of the past, because maybe in that past of that person, father was having an affair or mother was having an affair. So they're projecting this on their partner. So by the time the partner calls them at 10:30, they're yelling and screaming and out of control, and their partner is thinking that they're really crazy and out of control. And a few episodes of that, and then the partner starts thinking, do I really need this? Okay? And then they start actually backing out of the relationship. And so that person who's in that horrible amygdala reaction, which is the primitive brain, is projecting so hard on the partner that the partner starts ducking and defending for their dear life, their emotional life, and then that partner may actually leave. So this is the WTF.
Yeah, we're going to talk about some of the more signs of that.
Right. So if you can get into a little bit more of the neurology and the physiology of what happens.
Right. But we're going to talk first about consequences of childhood abandonment and neglect. And self-esteem is the main spring that slates a child for success or failure. And I actually firmly believe that in what I did with my kids. Consequences of child abandonment and neglect create emotionally starved children who long to be loved and fill the emptiness inside. So creating emotionally starved children, when a child spends many hours outside his own home, his or her home, when they come back from school, he wants to share their experiences from the school with someone, or at least the parents, whether good or bad. Children want to relate what happened to parents or someone, and oftentimes they come home and there's nobody there, called latchkey kids, of course.
Yeah.
So nobody is teaching and nurturing them, at least not the parents, but maybe strangers. And then we have the daycare situation, which is, or a nanny. If they're spending more time with that, then why do they need the parents? And they totally neglect and ignore and don't even pay attention to the parents. And obviously that's another dynamic that's just a blast.
And what that creates is a sense of feeling lost and forlorn.
Yeah.
So they want to share their experience with another person, namely their parents, who are the people that are going to mirror and be proud of them. And what they're getting back is nothing. And so when nothing comes back when you reach out, what ends up happening is that you define yourself in the eyes of your parents, primarily your primary caregiver. And if she is not attuning or he is not attuning, we've got a problem, because the child looks in the eyes of the parent and sees nobody home, or maybe doesn't even look in the eyes because that parent isn't around.
Well,
and
in
there's that emptiness.
In an extreme example, mommy and daddy leave before the child wakes up in the morning because they have to go to work.
Right.
And they're working their tush off, and they come home after they're in bed.
Right.
So now what?
Right, and that's in the later form of life. We're talking now 3, 4, 5. Okay, so at that age, children are now verbal. They want to verbally share with their parents what happened, and if there's no mirroring back, what happens is that they go inward. Okay, or they can act out and become attention-seeking by becoming truant in school. And then they get attention. It's usually attention in the principal's office. But as I mention much in my book, some attention, even negative attention, is better than no attention at all. Now,
Yes.
peel that back to the first few years of life, the first 2 years of life. If the baby is not having eye contact and skin contact, and a mother that helps them to formulate the core of their being, then the baby has really nowhere to turn, because the baby will turn to mom. She's not available. Dad's not available. And then they turn inward, and there's nothing in there because it hasn't been filled.
It's
the
called
hole in the soul is there. 'cause
Emotional emptiness.
Emotional emptiness.
Which is a tragedy that leads to suicidal tendencies, which invokes a hopeless state of mind and breeds on grounds of loneliness and feelings of being unloved, abandoned, and neglected. Teen suicide is the leading cause of death in the United States, and it's been increasing for years.
And
I mean, that's the coup de grace.
And what's so worrisome is that we're getting away from human touch,
Yeah, we
and we're
sure are.
going electronic. And
The
it
television is a great babysitter.
yeah, just great. Right. And so we're really losing our humanity. We're on our cell phones more than we are in conversations. We are connecting more virtually than we are in person.
We are.
This is really, really creating a problem, because it is that eye contact, that face-to-face, the skin contact that keeps us sane.
I read a real quick little blurb I think I put on my Facebook page. Instead of trying to connect all those people on Facebook, why don't you put the phone down and connect with somebody who's right in front of you?
Right, and the most frustrating, and I think we're just going to see more and more of this, Murray Bowen, Dr. Murray Bowen, who I refer to a lot in my practice, is the father of the concept of the multi-generational transmission process. Okay. And he feels that every generation is going to get worse and worse, because as we are parenting less and less, the families are disintegrating, we're creating this hole in the soul, and we're basically going to implode and explode, and we're going down this garden path of psychopathology and dis-ease, as I like to refer to it. So what's the solution? The solution is parent properly. Before you become a parent, if you have issues with your wounds of childhood, by all means, heal those issues, because you don't want to continue this multi-generational transmission process.
One of my definitions of children is God's little spies. They have
Right.
an amazing ability to figure it out and copy it sometimes, which
And
is
copy
just
it, and
scary.
That's the problem. They copy it. So if you don't heal and you pick a partner that's not healed, then what you're going to be creating is an environment of some form of neglect, smothering, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, and then you're passing that to the next generation. So again, what's the solution is to really heal your own childhood wounds and learn attachment theory parenting, which is all about providing the emotional nutrients that your child needs to form a healthy human psyche, so that they do have that place within that's filled and whole and complete as much as humanly possible, so that they don't implode and go into suicide, because implosion is really the opposite of explosion. So the ultimate implosion is suicide. The ultimate explosion is homicide. Okay, and in between there, we've got a full range of ways that people implode in terms of depression, or maybe they'll self-harm and cut themselves, or they'll shut down, or some form of an internal way of killing off the self. And then the explode is really when the anger builds and they project the feelings onto other people. And sometimes people do both. They do a little exploding, they do a little bit of imploding. And Walt, as you like to say,
please do not explode or implode, but unload by getting on the couch with Dr. Judy. And the phone number is area code 323-843-2826 here in the United States. Or if you're watching us internationally, you can reach us on Skype at UBN, for Universal Broadcasting Network, UBN2. Number 2 on Skype. You know, the epitome of that, of implosion explosion, is the father that kills the kids, kills the mom, and then he kills himself.
Right, that's
both. Boom, that's the whole shebang right there.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, that comes full circle.
Now, some of the other causes of abandonment issues, in addition to what you've said, which expands upon this real quick, is when parents get divorced, if you are adopted, alcoholic parents, if you lost a parent or a sibling, abuse during your childhood, and we talked a little bit about that, emotionally unavailable caregivers, we've talked about that.
Yeah, parents who are on the computer all the time, on the cell phone all the time, texting and driving, something that drives me insane.
That'll kill more than any the relationship.
Right.
Narcissistic caretakers, which we've discussed in previous shows. History of low self-esteem, and lastly is verbal abuse. So that's some of them. So some of the signs of abandonment issues. First is you attach too soon to another.
Right, because you don't want to be alone, so you glom on to another human being.
The clingy.
Right, the cling on.
The cling on. There it is. Or you exhibit excessive controlling behaviors.
Because you're scared of being abandoned, so you've got to control the relationship, and so you can see that behind the control is a lack of trust in
mistrust.
the world.
Exactly. You bet. You find flaws in potential mates.
Right, because that way you don't have to get too close, and so you can have your reason for why you're going to get out. And the reason is never you, of course. It's because that person has this issue or that issue, and the underlying is, again, a fear of intimacy, because intimacy for the person who's been hurt, wounded in childhood, equals pain and loss. So if we're looking at it from a Pavlovian point of view, you know, Pavlov's dog, right? Every time the bell rings, the dog is served food. Okay, if we look at it from that point of view, then the child associates closeness with loss. So I got close to my mom and then my mom died. Or I got close to my grandfather and then he sexually abused me. Or I got close to a boyfriend or some other very significant person and he cheated on me. So this pairing, if you will, of loss and betrayal and pain gets paired with intimacy. And so the defense against that is to try to control it or not even enter into it, right? Or run when you feel it, right? If you feel too close. So one of the aspects of people who suffer from fear of abandonment is they don't know how to regulate their feelings within a relationship, and so they burden other people with their emotions, and then the other partner has to bear the emotional baggage, if you will, of the person, and it's too much for them because they become their thermostat. Okay, that's why the codependency, that's why the cling on wants to cling on to their partner because their emotions are regulated by that partner, and then the partner gets sick and tired of being the thermostat, the emotional thermostat for that person. It's just too much. So what's the solution there is to not burden the partner, but to heal in therapy so that the relationship itself can be less of a need for the partner to be your therapist, and that partner could be your best friend, lover, person that you share joy with, person that you share life with, but not your therapist. And that's another thing that drives people away, is that they make their partner their
everything.
They're everything.
Yeah.
It's a little much to...
Yeah, it's a little overwhelming.
Yeah.
And along those lines, you sabotage the relationship. You kind of throw a monkey wrench into stuff. Do you find ways to mess things up? Do you throw monkey wrenches into what's happening? You pick fights. You point out problems. You amplify the negative. Again, you're just trying to mess things up, and you keep your distance and don't want it too close. You constantly have fears of cheating, which we've talked about. You expect perfection. You have unrealistic expectations of the perfect mate. And you want to, you're seeing, you want to break up after a minor disagreement just because it isn't going as smoothly as you want to. That your mate will sexually satisfy each and every time you guys are intimate. It's just the expectations are really high, and that's
because
tough.
a person's so emotionally hungry at this point, and so when they finally find a person, they're starving and they just want a really big meal, and they are very unrealistic in their expectations, as you said. And so one of the aspects of abandonment is the devaluing of the self, because the core belief is oftentimes, I'm not lovable, okay? And then they look to the partner to mirror back that they are lovable. It's just that the fuse is so short. If they don't exactly mirror back that notion that they're lovable, the person can just snap. So in other words, if there's a small hint that the person doesn't find them lovable or isn't doing a good job of mirroring them, again, I'm going back to the fact that they weren't mirrored properly to begin with, and so they're hurting in that area, and they need that so badly from the partner. If the partner fails to mirror them, if they don't do it just right or say it just right, they'll hit the roof.
But wait, there's more.
There's more?
How about you have commitment issues? You're a serial dater. Once that newness of that relationship wears off, you're off to the next one because the honeymoon's over.
Right. In other words, that person failed you in some respect, and it doesn't take much. Okay, just one sense of being off in terms of the mirroring aspect can set the person off.
You feel really resentful if you're excluded. So maybe there's a family gathering, and for some reason you weren't invited. That's a lame example, but it's an example. Ticks you off like there's no tomorrow. You feel insecure and resentful. You feel as though they don't need you. You're afraid of how much you need them.
That's really scary, because if you need them and they don't need you, that's not really a balanced situation. And we're excellent emotional bookkeepers. So
Yeah, we are.
if we've been deprived in our childhood, we want to make up. So we want that partner to make everything up for us. And again, too much pressure on the partner. And by the way, this is a call-in show, and please, we love call-ins. So
We do. And the number is area code 323-843-2826. That's 323-843-2826. And you know what? We really don't want to feel abandoned. So if you want to help us in that fear, you can call us.
because we're so codependent.
Yes, we are. We
Yes,
really
we
need
are.
our audience. There are some suggestions on how to cope with fear of with abandonment issues in relationships. First is stop blaming yourself. Make yourself believe that you are not responsible for whatever happened to you because it is in your past. Right?
We are not the cause of part one of our lives. Childhood is a hostage situation. We are not in charge of who parents us or who lacks ability to parent us. And so this hole in the soul, this deep darkness that comes from that feeling of abandonment is not something that's self-created. It's something that was created by how we were treated in the first few years of life. So please remember, this is not your fault.
It's not. As Dr. Judy likes to say a lot, childhood is a hostage situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And as I say, on the highway of life, If you're barreling down the highway and you're focusing on your rearview mirror as opposed to the gigantic windshield and what's before you, inevitably you're going to crash. So,
right, and that's why it's so important to heal your wounds of childhood, because you may think that you're done with the past, but the past is not done with you. Right. And so how do you get done with the past is you have to go and finish these emotional open files, if you will, and you've got to finish the psychological business, as Freud says, and so that you don't visit this psychological, or I like to call it the psychological business on other people. Okay, so at the Psychological Healing Center, we try to get you from psycho to psychological and teach you how to think like a shrink so that you can process your emotions. I know it's a little corny, but
it's actually it's a play on the movie The Gift, which we shrunk some time ago, actually.
Yes, right. Yeah. And if you see the movie The Gift, you'll recognize that
the Psychological Healing Center
that
is in it.
They use the Psychological Healing Center to film the movie.
Yeah,
it's just a really
from the living room to the front door to the bathroom to the shower,
all of
everything in between.
All of it.
Yes, indeed.
Right.
And recognize your fear. Right? I mean, we all have fears. Accepting the fact that you have abandonment issues in relationships means the battle is half won.
Yes.
You can't suppress your issues if you don't acknowledge them.
Right. I had many times people will say, well, I told my partner that I have abandonment issues, and that's really important and very mature to say, look, this is my Achilles heel. That doesn't mean that you have to jump every time I say how high, but it does mean that if I'm a little needier or if I'm a little more freaked out when you leave, just work with it, because nobody's perfect and we all have to attune ourselves to the people that we choose into our lives, not to the point where we crack, but a little bit, because ultimately relationships are healing. And if you can be with a partner who has empathy and can really work with whatever issues you're having, then you're with an empathic partner. On the other hand, you can't overuse that empathy card, right? And you have to, as I like to put it, own your own stuff, which means self-reflect, self-correct, do the work, get emotionally hardier, do the therapy so that you bring more mental health to the table.
And one of the ways to do that actually is to invest and get Dr. Judy's book, because at the end of every chapter is a section entitled Think Like a Shrink.
Not entitled. Not entitled.
Oh, no, excuse me.
Not entitled.
Well, actually, at the end of every chapter is Think Like a Shrink.
That's right.
And Dr. Judy's goal really is for you to become independent of your therapist, no offense, and think like a shrink.
Right, exactly. And I just also want to announce that we have a beautiful new office now in Beverly Hills. It's
new digs.
It's absolutely gorgeous, and it's for those of you who live in the LA area. It's right near Beverly Hills High School, right near Wilshire and Santa Monica. Very convenient, very lovely, and I have a beautiful staff of people who are trained in the mind map therapy, which takes 10 sessions. We don't believe in this long-term talk stuff, and we're very goal-oriented. And after that, you can do follow-up if you wish. And we're developing a part 2, which is called Mind Map Squared, which is more goal-oriented. So we'll talk more about that in another episode.
Tuned. And along those lines, a couple other suggestions about how to cope with the fear of abandonment. One is ask for help. Chances are you're going to dig deeper. And along those lines, it says, after recognizing your fear, you need to identify the root.
And the root is always the blueprint.
And that's exactly what the mind map does.
The blueprint is always based on the generations before you. Your mother, your father, your maternal grandparents, your fraternal grandparents. And if you do a genogram, a psychological genogram, you will see that sometimes dis-ease skips a generation. And so mom and dad may not be alcoholics, but maybe your grandfather or your grandmother suffered from alcoholism, which may show up in you or may show up in your children. So just because your parents are not exactly obviously showing up as the wounders, don't forget that they've been wounded by their parents, and this is all trickling down through them, from your ancestors, through your parents, to you. And somebody has to break the cycle.
Absolutely. And at that point, you need to take a leap of faith. After knowing what went wrong in your past, you have to take the next step. You can't go back and undo what happened, but you can have your future, which we've talked already on this show. You can already create a happier tomorrow, take a leap of faith to overcome your issues, and go out there and just start. You know, it's like if you're gonna walk around the block, you have to leave your house to do it. So just start.
And what's really significant about this system is that you really do have to clear the slate, because the past is your encoded blueprint, and it's that faulty blueprint. And in order to bring you to health, we have to dismantle the lies upon which it is based, lies that then define you and your core belief. I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, I'm not something or other. Okay, and these are limited and limiting, and they limit you because they stop you from growing into what I talk about in my book, Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect. I talk about the big I and the little I. And the little I is our reduced sense of self, and our big I is our self-actualized sense of self, the self that is able to reach and grow and continue to manifest what I call the best of our best. And the little I is the one that's the crippled I, really. And so when we are abandoned, when we are injured at the causal level, foundationally, we cannot manifest, because really what's happening in the abandonment schemas, we're busy licking our emotional wounds. We're busy constantly regulating our emotions because it wasn't done for us. So how can we possibly grow, and how can we possibly be creative and, you know, do music or artwork or meet people or anything really when we're busy regulating our emotions? It's a really, really difficult job. So what people who are fortunate enough to have all of these emotional needs met have over people who don't have these emotional needs met is that they have a really solid base upon which they can grow, and they don't have to spend all of this energy on regulating their feelings. They can just do life.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is you probably read this next one in the notes I sent you. Know your worth. Just remember this. I want you guys to do an experiment. When you get to your bathroom, I want you to look at your forehead really, really carefully and see if the phrase, "I'm unworthy," is on your forehead.
Right.
And if it isn't, guess what? You're worthy.
So what Walt is referring to is that we're not born this way.
No,
okay, we're born
not.
We're born pretty much whole and complete.
Yes.
Most of us, I mean, unless we're suffering from some damage at birth, that happens. But for the most part, we're born in a blank slate state, and then our parents either bring out the best of us, or our parents abandon, smother, or abuse and cast a shadow over us and limit our growth and limit our ability to self-regulate. Self-regulation, as I like to see it, is how long is your emotional bandwidth? Okay, so people who have been abandoned have very short bandwidths. They can't tolerate much.
No.
Okay, so if you're out too late, they will snap. If you hurt them a little bit, they may experience that pain a lot more deeply than most people. So again, the importance of getting your emotional nutrients during the first few years of life, which means that if you're going to be parents, then the most important thing that you could do as a parent is heal thyself and then learn how to parent and understand how important it is for the neurophysiology of that child to develop those neural pathways, which then develop as a result of that eye contact, that skin contact, that mirroring, the calm family environment, a solid basis of a foundation for them to grow upon, continue to grow.
And stop generalizing. Okay? Just because something bad happened to you in your past doesn't mean it will keep making the same mistake over and over again. Remember, you were a different person back then. So, you know what? The past is the past. I know it's challenging to forget about it and move forward, but it can be done. And another one here is let go of your fear.
Which is really hard to do.
It's not easy.
And it's really,
not.
I just want to say, it's easy to say stop generalizing. It's easy to say let go of your fear. But the truth is that when you're in trauma, you generalize. Why? Because you're fight flight. Okay? So if there's a little piece of evidence, which is fear is false evidence appearing real. FEAR, false evidence appearing real. So if you get a little piece of information that is a possible alert signal, a little red flag, then somebody with abandonment issues is going to generalize, because that generalization in their mind is going to save their life, and they cannot shut down the fear. And they can't stop generalizing until the emotional correction is made. Okay, so that's why cognitive behavioral therapy sometimes is the second step to all of this. Step one is to go into the emotional wounds, because you can't tell somebody in a fight-flight state, stop generalizing, or stop your fears. They can't. The horse is out of the barn. So this doesn't even make sense to a person like this.
Well, and it is impossible to put the toothpaste back in the tube.
That's right.
Yeah.
So now that's why we have to go back into the wound. You've got to go back into the tube, right, and see what's there, and then squeeze out the stuff that doesn't work for you and empty that out so that you can literally reboot your system.
There it is. Because, when you find someone who's really worth holding, easier said than done, but try not to let your abandon issues get in your way. If they love you, they will make an effort and will accompany you in your journey, because it's all it is. It's a journey.
They will up to a point.
Yeah, up to a point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Again, you've got to be responsible for yourself. You cannot make your partner your therapist. I can't emphasize that. And your partner is not obligated to ruin his or her life as a result of your dis-ease. So a good partner, if somebody's in a partnership with somebody that's not well, then a good partner will support you as you're going through your healing process. A good partner, however, will not allow him or herself to be boundary violated just because you're not well. They don't have to take your acting out behaviors. They don't have to take your threats, or they don't have to take on and soak in your psychopathology. Healthy partner will not.
And it's a journey.
Yeah.
Take it slow. Coming out of fear is not an event, it's a process.
Right.
It's not a one-time thing. You will need to overcome your fear multiple times. It's your journey that matters the most. It's what you become along the way, as opposed to what where you end up.
And it's the multiple times that builds the trust, because if you go through it and you mess up and you work with whoever you're working with and it gets activated again, then over time and over truth and over the process, you build trust in that person, whether it be your therapist or your partner or whoever you're trying to have a healthy attachment to. And the core aspect is to find a relationship that is a securely attached relationship for you. that means you've got to be healthy enough so that that person won't want to get rid of you, okay? Because that's your responsibility, okay? So you work your butt off on yourself and your issues, hopefully before you enter a relationship. And if you're in a relationship, you still work your butt off on your issues so that you don't overburden your partner with your issues, okay? Because I like to say to my patients, look, if you do that, then there aren't enough tissues for your issues, and your partner will run out of tissues. And I'm not a big fan of breaking up, but ultimately, if the person won't handle their own problems, I see it this way. Don't get rid of the person, get rid of the problem. But if the person refuses to get rid of their problem, ultimately, you cannot ruin your life as a result of somebody else's problems.
You're worthy. You're worth too much. And lastly,
Right.
believe. Believe that you can win this war, but it's got to have some faith and a little time and a little patience. So you need to make yourself realize that you want this, and you're worthy of it, and you're worthy of being happy and having a fulfilled relationship and a fulfilled life.
Right, and that partner's job is not to fulfill all of your needs. I'm, again, being redundant here, but it's such an important concept, especially to people who think that they're going to get better as a result of being in a relationship. It is true that relationships are healing, but I've also seen a lot of relationships go down under because they just keep playing out the WTF, the what the Freud. And here's my definition of WTF, okay? So if there's a situation and the reaction to the situation is way over the top, and you're in your mind saying, WTF, why did that person behave like that? Then you know that that's an overreaction. And that overreaction has very little to do with the situation. The situation may have triggered that overreaction, but the cause of the overreaction is in the foundational, in the first few years of life. And that's what we have to take a look at closely, is that first few years of life as the foundation. And so when people can be mature enough to self-reflect and self-correct and say something like, I'm thinking about it the other day when I hit the roof when you came home half an hour late, I could see where I was triggered in my abandonment issues, and I could see that it reminded me of my mother promising to come home early, and she wouldn't show up till midnight, and she was drunk, and the fact that you had alcohol on your breath triggered my issues with my alcoholic mother who would leave me latchkey for too many hours, okay? That is an example of being responsible. And if you find a partner who's willing to self-reflect and self-correct, you have yourself a very mature partner.
Absolutely.
And you can learn how to do this. Mm-hmm. All you need to do is own your own stuff. And it's remarkable how reparative that is, because the partner will no longer feel that the burden is on him or her. He or she will feel that the person has a mature person who's willing to own their own stuff and grow.
And that is all the time we have for our show. We've got a little time left for the song We're Going to Shrink. So if you want to know more, you can always write us at info@drjudywtf.com. And we respond to everything that comes in. I know you guys are requesting the wound document.
The wound prevention.
Wound prevention.
Yeah.
Yeah. So somebody just requested those.
Wound prevention plan.
Yeah.
And we're
It's all on
happy to
one page.
send it to you. It's a way of, it's a process for what to do when you're emotionally wounded. And just give us your email address,
We'll get it right back to you.
we'll get it to you.
Absolutely. So this is a song by Aerosmith, and it's entitled "Hole in the Soul." I thought Dr. Judy
Amazing.
would enjoy this song. I'm down a one-way street with a one-night stand with a one-track mind, out in no man's land. The punishment sometimes doesn't seem to fit the crime. Yeah, there's a hole in my soul, but one thing I've learned, for every love letter written, there's another one burned. So you tell me how it's going to end this time.
Okay, so I'm going to filter this through the theme of abandonment. I think the one-way street is the narrowness of not being connected to. Okay, it's like all of these connectivity emotions are supposed to create pathways, and now the pathway is really narrow. The one night stand is the temporary relationships that people enter into as a result of fear of abandonment. The one-track mind, again, the one-track mind is a reminder that all they can really think about is regulating their own emotions, and they're not really candidates for connecting with other people. Out in no man's land, there seems to be a sense of aloneness, a sense of loss. The punishment doesn't seem to fit the crime. In other words, we are not the cause of these deep, dark feelings. We are, in a sense, at the effect of the way we've been caregiven by our parents. And then that creates the hole in the soul. And here, I guess the reference is to some kind of relationship. For every love letter written, there's another one burned. So that's the up and down feeling, the passion of being in love and being connected to the abandonment and the burning of the relationship.
It's over because I'm blowing out the flame. Take a walk outside your mind. Tell me how it feels to be the one who turns the knife inside of me. Take a look and you'll find there's nothing there, girl. Yeah, I swear, I'm telling you, girl. Yeah, 'cause there's a hole in my soul that's been killing me forever. It's a place where a garden never grows. There's a hole in my soul. Yeah, I should have known better, 'cause your love like a thorn without a rose.
Well, without a rose, there's no upside, right? There's only downside to hooking up and getting intimate and feeling it. So what has this person done? Well, the person knows that intimacy is like a knife inside, or a thorn without the rose. And so, better yet, why should they allow for these feelings to take place? So just cut all this out and just build a wall around the whole thing so that they don't have to become vulnerable to any of this.
I'm as dry as a 7-year drought. I've got dust for tears, and I'm all tapped out. Sometimes I feel broke and can't get fixed.
Well, the person's very honest about how deep this goes.
Yeah, this is pretty
There's
deep.
no fix here. And the drought is really about that emotional emptiness. And so they're drying out, their feelings are shutting down, and they're going internal. And they don't even have any tears left because they're shutting down.
I know there's been all kinds of shoes underneath your bed. Now I sleep with my boots on, but you're still in my head. And sometimes tells me this time I'm down to my last licks, 'cause it's over, turn it over, and it's driving me insane.
So here's a person who knows that the person's been with many people, lots of boots underneath that person's bed, and that person can't get him or her out of his head, okay, but they're always at this brink of, okay, so it's driving me insane because I think it's over, but in the case of these abandonments, it's over and it's not over. It's over. It's a blinking lights thing.
Take a walk outside your mind. Tell me how it feels to be the one who turns the knife inside of me. Take a look at what you'll find. There's nothing there, girl. Yeah, I swear.
Right, so the person's trying to be hollow, the person's trying to be numb, but I don't think that they're actually able to quite turn it off because they can feel. They are even alluding to the fact that, come on, how would it feel to tell me how it feels to be the one who turns the knife inside of me? So they're scared of that knife because that's how vulnerable they are.
I'm telling you, girl, yeah. 'Cause there's a hole in my soul that's been killing me forever. It's a place where a garden never grows. There's a hole in my soul. Yeah, I should have known better, 'cause your love's like a thorn without a rose. It's over. Yeah, it's over, and I'm blowing out the flame.
Right, and the best way that they can prevent more hurt is just to try to blow out that flame. And I love this line, a place where a garden never grows. So there's just no life. There's no nourishment. If there's no emotional nourishment,
spent.
nothing grows.
Yeah, it's spent. And then, of course, back to the course. Take a walk outside your mind. Tell me how it feels to be the one who turns the knife inside of me. Take a look, and you'll find there's nothing there, girl. Yeah, I swear. I'm telling you, girl, yeah, because there's a hole in my soul that's been killing me forever. It's a place where a garden never grows. There's a hole in my soul. Yeah, I should have known better, because your love's like a thorn without the rose.
Now, this is a person who repeated the blueprint of his or her past because that hole in the soul, again, is not fulfilled because they didn't do the work, and then they picked a relationship that was going to be an abandoning one. So they did a WTF, a what the Freud.
And that's by Aerosmith, which we're going to close out with. Hole in My Soul. This has been Walt Lusk with Dr. Judy for DrJudyWTF.com. That was where we're at. And you can catch us here every Thursday at 8 p.m. Next week, Pacific here in Los Angeles, by the way. Next week, we're going to do free-for-all calls. So if you want to call us and get on the couch next week and save all your abandonment issues for next week, please feel free to do so, because you guys are going to kind of set the tone for what's going on. And we'll see how this goes. We'll probably continue this, but we're looking forward to having you all on the couch with Dr. Judy. And thanks for listening, watching, liking, and sharing. And until next time, God bless.